Good morning. It's a great privilege to be here. Thank you, the Health Quality and Safety Commission, for inviting me. Linda, thank you so much for ferreting me out and encouraging me to come over. And also I'd like to thank Chris and Janice as well for having me here. It's a great honour. It's fantastic being in Wellington. I actually lived here, and my brother pointed out the other day that it was 26 years ago that I lived here. So it was quite a long time ago, and the weather's still the same. Monsoonal, balmy and clement. This is the second time I've actually spoken in my home country, so it's really great to be here, and it's really nice to have my mum here as well. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about the mental health, what I do, and I'm going to split it up into three parts. The first part is a little bit about what I do with the Black Dog Institute, and then I'm going to sort of go into the book that was mentioned, Living with a Black Dog, and I call this the DVD extras, or the behind the scenes, or the director's cut. And I'm going to go through that, and I'm going to wrap it up with just a little bit of talk of resilience, which is part of a program that I developed for the Black Dog Institute. So, I'm Matthew, and I'm an author and illustrator and speaker, and one of the places where I spend a lot of my time is the Black Dog Institute. I've been there since 2005. Can I just see a show of hands to see if anyone's heard of the Black Dog Institute here? Oh, yeah, quite a few. And one of the things that I am very proud to be associated with the Black Dog Institute is that it is, from the outside, it is a very academic place. It's part of the University of New South Wales. It's also on the grounds of the Prince of Wales Hospital. So there's a lot of psychiatrists, there's professors, there's GPs, there's clinical researchers, clinical psychologists, and there's a lot of brain power in that place. But the thing that I love about it is that it is sort of with fair balance, that it's fair balanced with consumers and people like myself. I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I was in advertising for 15 years, which made my hair go grey. So I suppose I see myself more as a communicator, and I feel very privileged to be there. One of the things that we do is we have everything that we say and do is based on the research that we do. So all the stuff that we take out to the consumers or that we take to people in the mental health field is all based on the clinical research that we do. So we've done research into exercise, and we know that exercise is effective for treating mild to moderate depression as antidepressants. We're doing a fantastic study into men's well-being at the moment. We're trying to find out what makes men happiest, because men have a higher rate to suicide than women. We've done studies into chocolate. We've researched that dark chocolate is actually limited amounts, that is not bad as a mood stabilizer, so you can woof it. So there's always a lot of ongoing research studies. There's always a lot of researchers from around the world who come in and help us out. We also have 4 specialised clinics. We've got a bipolar clinic, we've got a depression clinic, we've got a general mental health clinic, and we're just starting up an adolescent clinic for 12 to 18-year-olds. We also are very, very big on education, so we spend a good part of our time educating people on all aspects of mood disorders, namely depression, bipolar and resilience. So we do a lot of training around psychiatry, to psychologists, to GPs, to anyone in the mental health field. We also do a lot of workplace education as well, so we go out and talk to corporates. And then we do a lot of work in the community. And this is another thing that we do, which I think is a really powerful part of the Black Dog Institute, is that we involve consumers. People like myself, and we have a lot of volunteers who come in and they interweave their own personal stories with the research evidence-based stuff that we do. So we go out there, and so that makes a very, very powerful bookends, if you like, very powerful dialogue and stories, so people can really get their heads around it. And obviously, the community is very important in the work that we do. We do all aspects of the community, from the Reserve Bank right through to, the armed services, the firefighters, to farmers. My father was a farmer, and someone said to me, we need to look after our farmers because they are the people that feed us. And I think, and the other group that we were involved with a couple of years ago, we got involved in Mardi Gras, and the gay and lesbian Mardi Gras, and we built a 3.5 metre black dog, which had a bit of glitter on it. And we had about 100 dancers dancing along in synchronization behind it. And down the side of the truck we said, don't be sad, be gay. And and the other one we said was turning dark clouds into rainbows. And we won Best Float and Show, which was quite a big coup. So I suppose our biggest mantra, if you like, is really breaking down stigma when it comes to depression. Sane Australia said that around about 2/3 of people who have mental health issues do not seek help. And I think a lot of this is still because of underlying stigma, the fear of losing their jobs, the responsibility, or fearing how it might affect their insurance and so forth. So again, we just talk to everyone across the whole gamut of the population. And I suppose the people that are most important are those people who are suffering, that are in need of our help. We get a lot of funding from the government, from the federal government and the state government. We get a bit of funding from the University of New South Wales and from the hospital. But more importantly, again, this is where our consumers come and people come in and they fundraise for us. And again, I think it's just, it's I suppose, to me, I'm really interested in the whole idea of recycling experience. So a lot of these people might be people who have suffered. They might be people who have lost a loved one to suicide. It might be someone who's trying to support someone who's going through it. And again, it's just this fantastic energy that we see time and time again. And this is where we get a lot of our fundraising revenue from people who fundraise for us. And I think this is probably one of the most important slides. We couldn't do anything that we do without the support of our consumers and our volunteers. We've got a fantastic woman at the Black Dog Institute called Sarah Connor, or Sarah Connor as we call her, which she gets very sick of. And she is this amazing light of a person who just has an incredible way with our volunteers. And a lot of the volunteers have been there since we've been there, since we opened our doors officially in 2005. A lot of those volunteers have actually gone on to work with us, so they're part of the staff now. And we've just got this incredible army of these people who come out and do the most incredible work. And it's across the tier. It's just from people who stuff envelopes to who go into really high-level CEO talks and talking to the real high corporate levels. So we wouldn't be able to do anything without the consumer and what we do. And I suppose at the end of the day, the most important aspect of what we do is giving people in the mental health field the right ammunition, the right information, the research-based educational tools. We're very big into e-health as well. You're more than welcome to go and have a look on the website and see what we're doing in that regard, and so that they have the best possible outcome for the consumer, the sufferer. So in 2005, I wrote our first little Black Dog book, which was called I Had a Black Dog. And the year before last, I turned this book into a video for the World Health Organization. And then just before Christmas of last year, this little video, it's just if you Google it, I Had a Black Dog on YouTube, you'll find it. Just before Christmas last year, it went viral. And it had, I think it's had around about, last time I saw it had about 3 million views. And I don't understand the way of the webs, but it was pretty overwhelming. And I got a lot of emails from people all over the world. Most of them were very positive, but I got a few saying, what the hell have you got against dogs? Especially black dogs, what have you got against black dogs? And I got to say, I've got a dog of my own, and this is Cookie. So this was a Christmas. She looks a bit depressed, I have to say. But I think, dogs are a fantastic metaphor. And the reason, people quite often say to me, did you start the Black Dog Institute? And I didn't. But I think that, the Black Dog Institute, the actual logo is based on Winston Churchill's V for Victory. And he obviously had very bad depression in his life, and he called it a black dog. But it actually goes back to Celtic times. And I think a dog is actually a fantastic metaphor for depression, because it is something that is outside of ourselves. It is something that we sometimes don't have control of. But it is something that needs our understanding. It needs our compassion. It needs discipline. It needs love. So I think a dog is a very good metaphor. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take you through Living with a Black Dog, which was a book that I co-created with my wife, Ainsley, who's actually in Wellington, but she's looking after my 2 girls. So she says to say hello, and she wishes she could be here. But we wrote this together, and when I wrote I Had a Black Dog, the publisher, Pan Macmillan, came back and said, do you think you could do another one based around carers? And I went, God, I don't think I've got any more depression in me. And I think I've said it all. And anyway, Ainsley and I sat down and we just started jotting it out, and very quickly we realised that we had a lot more to tell. And we went out and we interviewed a lot of people, and it was a really interesting process, actually. So here we go. The things that you may have noticed. Professor Gordon Parker, who started the Black Dog Institute, he said that, it's not just a mental thing, it's also a physical thing. And one of the first things that he says that he notices in people is the loss of twinkle or the sparkle in the eye. It's just not a physical thing. It affects us, our motor skills, it affects us physically, how we hold ourselves, how we move, how we articulate ourselves. It also affects the way that we sleep. And I always say that when good sleep goes, everything that depends on that sleep goes straight out the door with it. It's your mood, it's your memory, it's your ability to get stuff done. It affects our ability to actually fire up and to get going. That sort of whole thing of, we're like a car on a cold morning that's, very hard to start up. And also it can affect our poor guy, it affects our appearance, and our self-esteem. We start to give up on ourselves. People find it very hard to get out of bed in the morning and shower and get ready. And also the other thing that I really think it affects is our memory. I feel like, for a lot of the time, a lot of my life, I felt like I had a flour sieve for a brain. Everything would just fall through and nothing would stick. And also there's the loss of joy. When we lose joy in life, we really begin to question what the point of it is. To me, it's like a little bit of like a drop of ink in a glass of water. It just sort of muddies everything. And this is something that I went through. It doesn't just affect us personally. It doesn't just affect our relationships. It doesn't affect, what's going on in our lives. It also affects our work. When you consider that our work is really probably about 75% of our entire lives, that's a big chunk of it. And there's a saying that, that you hear quite often, which is presenteeism, which is when you're present and absent at the same time. And I went through a lot of my career. Just so you know, I spent 15 years working in advertising, and I spent a lot of my career in presenteeism. I could turn up, I could show up, and I call it putting a lot of energy into my show face. I could put my show face on when I needed to go to a meeting, when I needed to present an idea, but then I'd go and crawl onto my desk and go to sleep or go home or run away. So, and that in the end also costs, apparently depression costs the Australian economy around about $12.3 billion a year in lost revenue. And so it's, it affects a lot of things around the thing. The other thing that affects is that, not only do we start to pull away from our work, but we also start to pull away from the things that we enjoy and the people that we enjoy being with. We don't, I call it recessing into the cave. And then there's sort of a sadness or crying that is not really perhaps in keeping with what's really going on. I've had this one quite a bit, where you go away and you want to sort of relax and be on holiday, but you just can't. You can't sit still, you can't, so I really relate to this picture, although I've never worn a bikini. And then there's that sort of finding the wrong in everything, including the really positive things that are going on. And this one here is that flare-up of anger. The flare-up of anger, which again, like the crying, is not in keeping with what's going on. And I just figured this out, that what WTF means is, why the frown? And then there's, the loss of intimacy. It's like the garage door being brought down. And then there's that sort of self-abuse or self-medication. And I grew up here, so I know what it's like here, and I think we are very good at self-medication in New Zealand and especially, in Australia. When I look at sort of drugs and alcohol, if we look at, cocaine can give us confidence, speed can give us energy, marijuana can make us feel more relaxed, people who take ecstasy feel more at one and lovey-dovey with everyone, and alcohol, which is obviously the most publicly condoned and the most accessible, can give us Dutch courage, it can make us relax. But I really believe that if we have a susceptibility to depression, to anxiety, to bipolar, to any sort of mental health issue, that is only going to make it that much worse. And this one is very much reminiscent of what I used to do, and that is sort of hatching plans to get out of here. I used to go, if only I could go and live in a kibbutz, and I'm not Jewish, but if only I could live in a kibbutz, or if only I could live in a grass hut, in the jungle, or if only I could go and live in a disused castle on the coast of France somewhere. And what's not on this picture is, this is Ainsley lying there in a picture of her just going, trying to get out of here. She probably went, what the hell have I got myself into? And then there's also the discussion of not being here. And I think when people talk about not being here, this is a time when we've got to step in and say, are you really thinking seriously about this? Is this something you've thought about, and how are you going to do it? And really actually engage in that dialogue, because I think it's a very, very tricky area when we get into talking about suicide. But I think it's our right to be able to say, if you ever think about this, please can you call me first? Suicide is the highest cause of death in men in Australia under the age of 42. It's higher than skin cancer. It's 40% higher than the national road toll. So I think it's a dialogue that we need to, and I know there's a lot of perimeters and a lot of difficulty and a bit of taboo when we talk around these things, but it's a conversation that quite often we need to have more of, I believe. What not to say and do. This is some of these seem very obvious, but this is what people do all the time. Pointing out lovely weather is annoying and pointless. Socks. Socks, believe it or not, have very little to do with mental health. You might be right when you say it's all in your head, but don't say it. Leave that up to the mental health professional. Be a man. This is what's... It was quite funny when Ainsley was out interviewing partners or carers of people who were going through depression, especially with men. They were going, oh, guilty. And, if we could snap out of what we would, it's not a sign of weakness. And I think this is one of the most difficult things is don't be an armchair general. Don't come with unfounded advice and, try and tell people what to do. The other thing, I think empathy, understanding, support, love, compassion is all really important, but don't try and buck people up. Don't try and cheer them up. Don't try and snap them out of it. And then, sort of point out that there are people in this world far worse off than you. Because all that does is it just sort of compresses the guilt. It makes people feel worse and so on. And then don't push them into things that they don't want to do and then make excuses for their slightly bizarre behaviour. Good things to say and do. I think when we approach someone about their mental health, I think it's very difficult. I think a lot of people are very fearful that it might affect their relationship. And I think they're not sure how it's going to go. And one of the questions that I get constantly asked all the time is how do you go about talking to someone who's in denial? How do you actually engage with someone who doesn't want to talk about it? There's that old saying, you can take a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink. It's a very difficult conversation to have sometimes. But I really believe that to validate our own self and what we can see in that person, we just have to speak from the heart. We have to be authentic and we have to say what we see and go to them with some relevant and important information. I'm not trying to spruik my own books, but you could take one of my books. But it's that whole sort of stepping over the line and just sort of engaging with them. And the thing is, if they do open up and if they do acknowledge that there is a problem, one of the greatest things that we can do is to shut our mouth, grow our ears, and open our heart. And just be there for them. Let them speak. Be like a rock in the river and let that information flow around you. And if they say, I think I need help, try and find them the help, research the help, try and find them a good doctor, a good psychologist, a good psychiatrist. Make the appointment, and then best thing that you can do is to actually go with them. Professor Gordon Parker finds it really, really helpful when a partner or a carer comes into the first consultation, because you just get both sides of the picture and you can get to an understanding a lot more quickly. I have inscribed on the inside of my wedding ring, La Vie Simple. We got engaged in Paris, and La Vie Simple is the simple life. And I think stress is one of the greatest undoers for our mental health. If you have a susceptibility to depression or bipolar, whatever it is, stress will be one of the hair triggers. And, my life, I do travel a lot, and I've quite often got a book that I've got a deadline on. So, I do have a fair amount of stress, but I try to counterbalance that with meditation and with exercise and good sleep and all those sort of things. So I think, trying to actually just simplify your life is a really, really important thing to do. Embracing the mud. I think, when we have a sidekick, when we have a partner, it doesn't have to be our wife or husband, but when we have someone that we can work with, when we can actually go through this together, it is that the outcomes are obviously going to be so much better. And I always say knowledge is power and validation is a great healer. One of the greatest books that I ever read for me personally, and I read hundreds of books on this subject because I wanted to understand it, I wanted to get through it. And I read lots of books by psychiatrists and psychologists, but the best one that I read was Darkness Visible by William Styron. Miserable bloody book, and I don't recommend it to any of you. But it was the first book that totally articulated what I was going through personally. And to me, that made me realise that I was no longer alone. And that was the book that inspired me to create I Had a Black Dog. So when we know the knowledge, when we have the facts, we're going to be in a far better position in which to deal with it. This is what did you call it? It's an acrostic. I've never heard that word acrostic before. And this was an acrostic that I came up with, which was just get mad at the black dog. And this is really, MAD stands for management. It's management of your life. It's management of your alcohol intake. It's management of your expectation. It's management of your stress. A is for acceptance. Acceptance that this is an illness of a mental kind. Acceptance by those who are around you. Acceptance that this is not a life sentence. Acceptance that things will get better. And I think D, that is the most important one, is discipline. It's not for D is for dog, but D is for discipline. And that discipline is to see your doctor if you need to see the doctor. Take the medication if you need to take the medication. The discipline to exercise, the discipline to practice meditation and mindfulness. I think, and the hardest thing about depression is that when you're in it, you don't feel like doing anything. But that's the time when you have to do it the most. When Ainsley and I got together, I'd been going through depression for quite a while, and I as a prenup, I said to her, look, this is what's going on with me, and I need you to understand this. And she is a very buoyant person. I'm like sort of a small plane with the tail's been lopped off. I'm sort of flying all over the sky, and she's like a long-haul 747 jet on autopilot. She's very consistent. She's very strong in character. And she said, we'll get through it. I love you. We're going to get through this. And she had no idea what she was dealing with, and she came into it a little bit like Wonder Woman. And I think, her golden bracelets became pretty tarnished pretty quickly, because when I actually knew that I could actually be myself, that's when I became the most unwell, because I'd been keeping this show face on for such a long time. And I think for a partner, for a carer, it is very, very difficult for that person, because they might be trying to pick up the pieces, trying to manage their own lives, trying to manage a family, a business, whatever it is, their work, and then they're dealing with you as well. And that can begin to affect them. So we have to really look after our carers as well. And the other thing is, I quite like this picture. This is about sort of having boundaries. I think a lot of the thing for people when they go through depression or any sort of mental health issue, a lot of this is about self-discovery. A lot of this is about trying to figure yourself out for yourself. And I think it's time for a partner, a parent, a carer to also, to be invested, to be interested, to be there, but also to be able to step back, not to helicopter over them, not to check in on them all the time and to check on that they're okay. So just to give some space. I think the other thing that is really important is to actually understand the mental health field, who's out there. I think a lot of people don't understand the difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist. I think a lot of people go and see a psychologist or a psychiatrist like a lamb to the slaughter. They see the documentation of their degree up on the wall and they go, well, you obviously know more than I do. And I think, like what was mentioned before, what Janice mentioned about going to the mechanic. If your car's not in good form, and you get it back, you're not going to go back to that person. I think it should be the same for a lot of our mental health people. I've seen a lot of terrible psychologists and psychiatrists, but the ones that are good are worth their absolute weight in gold, and they're worth putting the time and effort into finding the right people. The other thing I think is I believe we're overly prescribed. I think, in Australia in 2010, I think there was something like 12.4 million scripts written for antidepressant and anxiety medication, which is quite incredible when you think about the size of Australia. And I think probably obviously those are a lot of repeat prescriptions, but I do believe that medication has its role and has its place, and I know for a lot of people it is an absolute godsend and it can make the absolute total difference in recovery, but I don't think it's the be-all and end-all. I think one of the limiting things that people find in getting help is the cost. Mental health issues is a very, very expensive hobby. You've got to see a GP, you've got to see a psychologist, you've got to see a psychiatrist, and insurance. And I'm not sure what it is here. I don't know. Is it Medicare here? No. But in Australia, they'll cover a little bit, but not a lot of it. But I always say to people, without your mental health, you have nothing. So I think investing in our mental health is really, really important. And this is, I believe, one of the most important pages of the book. And this is actually making an pact or an agreement with your carer or your partner or your parent or whoever, that you're going to check on each other. That you're going to, and this is one of the things that Ainsley and I did. And I did it for her when I was in a very bad space. I checked in on her to see how she was going, and we also made an agreement that there would be no bad behaviour, that there would be no anger, there would be no contempt. We also agreed that we'd do the right things, that I would exercise, I'd meditate, and I'd so it's just, you can make up your own list of things that you're going to agree upon, but sign it, make it official, make it a document so that you can really hold yourself to it. And I think one of the things that people do as a carer is they come in and they sort of sacrifice themselves, in order for the other person to get well. And I quite often look at a carer being like a moon orbiting a dying sun. They're just sort of going around, they're trying to pick up the pieces I mentioned earlier on and not quite often looking after themselves. I think nurses are people who quite often give so much to themselves and don't get any support or don't look after themselves that well. It's the same thing. And quite often, the most difficult thing to deal with people who, if they're depressed, they can be quite often very angry. But what they're saying is, I truly believe, it's not really them. It's not their true character. And what we've got to remember is that it's not them, it's the dog speaking. This was one of Ainsley's idea, and she said a nice thing to do would be to write down 10 things that you know to be true and that you love about that person and give it to them. And also do it the same for yourself and keep it close, just so you can always remind yourself of that. The other thing, again, is going back to the boundaries, is knowing your limits. Help, empathy, understanding, compassion, love are all really important. But don't get dragged into the vortex. That person, the sufferer, has to actually stand on their own 2 feet and get the care and take the responsibility of getting the right help and care as well from the professional side of things. One of the greatest things that I did when I was living in New York, because I quite often find if I went to see a psychologist or a psychiatrist, they'd go, right, thanks, Matt, our time's up, we'll see you next week. And I was going, I was just getting going. And the thing is, I found when I actually went and did a support group, it was just lovely being in amongst people who got me, who spoke the language, who came from it, And one of the things that I really realised is that although our experiences may be different, our backgrounds may be different, I always find the lyrics of these experiences very, very similar. So it's just lovely being in a supportive environment. And it's also great for the carer as well to go and get that support as well. If I could, I would probably redrawn this image for it to be men. Because I really believe that women, you're so far ahead of the game as far as being open, as far as being tactile, as being great listeners, as being compassionate. Men, especially I do a lot of work, speaking, I did a big national tour in Australia of the NRL, talking to buffy blokes. I talked to farmers, I talked to firemen, I talked to all these hard men. And men aren't very good at talking face to face. They'd much rather talk shoulder to shoulder. And it's much harder getting those kind of conversations going. But I think we quite often take our close friends a little bit for granted. I think we should be very careful that we don't dump all our world life problems on top of those friends, but I think we should respect them, and they should be there as buoyancy. They should be there as our wingmen, as our support, as the people that we love and laugh with. And this is really about, overcoming adversity. If we do the right things, if we get through it, if we learn how to be vulnerable. I don't know if any of you have actually looked up Brené Brown. She's an American. She spent, I think, 6 or 7 years, 6 or 7 years studying vulnerability and shame. And she got so into it that she ended up in hospital herself because she went so far into the rabbit hole. But I think, when we learn how to be vulnerable, when we learn how to be self-compassionate, when we learn how to actually embrace what's going on through us and really understand it, we can come out the other side and be better for it. And whatever it is that we're facing, being a physical issue or a mental issue, it will pass, it will pass, it will pass. When I actually completed Living with the Black Dog, the last page that I wanted to end up with was this. But publisher didn't think it was appropriate. Now I'm just going to wrap up reasonably quickly on understanding resilience. And I think resilience, I used to think it was a bit of a byproduct of a shampoo and a conditioner. But resilience is really sort of bouncing back, getting over adversity. I was in New York, standing a block from the World Trade Center when it came down in 2001. And I saw a lot of people die that day, and I certainly thought that I was going to die that day. And I think what I realised from that moment on, that all those people in those buildings, all those people on those planes, all the people that died, they all had stuff that they wanted to do. They all had plans that they wanted to get through. They had families that they wanted to grow old with, all those sorts of things, and it was just taken from them in a moment. Viktor Frankl, who wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, he was a psychiatrist, and he spent 5 years in concentration camps, one of them being Auschwitz. And he said that we have, although we feel that we're in control of our lives, we have absolutely no control over what happens to us in this lifetime. But what we have paramount control over is how we respond and how we bounce back from those events. And for me, the 9/11 event for me was my wake-up call, because I'd been muddling through depression for a good part of my adult life, and that was my wake-up call. Life's just short. We do not know what's around the corner. So it's not what you do when you get knocked down, it's all about what you do when you get back up again. Resilience starts with accepting what you can and cannot change. I think this is I heard mentioned before, Johnstone mentioned about the pilot. I heard one of the pilots who was flying the Qantas, the maiden flight of the Qantas A380, the really big super airliner, when the engine blew on its maiden flight. And he talks about inverting the logic. And when the engine blew up, he had something like 300 and something alarms and signals going off. And he said the thing is you'd just be totally overwhelmed. And so what they do is they invert the logic. And what that means is not trying to work with what's gone wrong, but actually working with what's right. And he does the same with physically disabled people, and he teaches them to ski. Not focusing on what they can't do, but just purely focusing on what they can do. And I think it's the same with our mental health. So accepting what we can and cannot change is really, really important. We can't change the weather, clearly, but we can certainly change how we interact with it. We can't change our history. We can't change what may have happened to us in the past. We can't change what might have happened to us. We can't change what we might have done to others in the past. We can't change our family. Sorry, Mum, as much as we'd like to. We can't change, but we can certainly change how we look at these things, how we feel about these things, how we talk about them, how we think about them with the right help and moving forward. And we can't build resilience without going through adversity. And I think adversity doesn't necessarily mean to say that we've got to go through a real hardship. I think adversity can be getting through a degree. It can be doing a marathon. It can be climbing a mountain. Whatever it is. It's when we come out through the other side. It is actually going through it, understanding it, embracing it. And when we do these things, when we do actually go through it and come out the other side, we can be better for it. We can be stronger, we can be kinder, we can be more patient, and we can have more purpose. When I look at the world in which we live, especially, we are so incredibly blessed in New Zealand and Australia to live where we do. And I think, I look at what we're capable of, the buildings we build, the freeways we build, the smartphones we have, the computer, the internet, surgery, planes, you name it, satellites in space. The power of the human mind, in my mind, is just incredible, phenomenally powerful. But I also believe that it's equally dangerous. It can be very persuasive, it can be very persistent, and it can be very negative. And I think quite often we just sort of give into it. We sort of say, well, you're the boss. And I really believe that the movies that we play on our mind can be IMAX in size. They can be Dolby surround sound, they can be 3D, they can be James Cameron in production values. But this is probably the most important part of my talk, I would like to think. And that is, no matter how persistent or how dangerous our thoughts are, the truth of the matter is that thoughts are not facts. All we have are our thoughts. And if you could tattoo that onto your mind, that would be great. So, and again, never act on them. And I think this is what happens to people. People just get stuck in a storm and they cannot see a way out. And I think a lot of people, especially if they take their lives, it's not because they want to end their life, they don't want to be a burden to others. So it's that, always talk about it, always try and learn the skills of communication. The other thing is, we as humans, we don't like pain, be it physical or mental. So we'll do our best to go over it, under it, away from it. But very rarely do we go through it. And I think one of the things that our fears are the most fearful of is us not being afraid of it. So confront our fears, challenge them on a daily basis. And one of the ways that we can do this is to actually because if you look at positive psychology sections, or if you watch Oprah Winfrey, a lot of it is all about affirmations and all that sort of stuff. But one of the things I like to do is to actually create 5 minutes every other day, once a week, where you go into a place that you don't particularly like. It's not your favourite chair, or do it at bedtime. It's probably out where you take the rubbish, and write down the things that are troubling you. Write them down, say them out loud, screw it up, set it on fire, rip it into pieces, punch it up, stamp on it, whatever it is, and leave it there. Just leave it there. It's like a demarcation zone, and get on with your day. It's not to say that all your problems are going to be fixed, but it's actually making a statement and putting a line in the sand, if you like. How do we build resilience? Well, we do things that float our boats. Apparently gardeners are one of the happiest amongst us. They're out in the sun, well, if there is any, they're out in the sun, they're getting vitamin D, they're planning for the future, they're getting a reward for their investment by fruit, by vegetables, by flowers, they're getting minerals from the earth, there's planning involved, and there's something to look forward to. So those are all the key things of well-being, if you like. So find stuff that really brings you joy and try and make time for that each week or every month. Be around people that lift your spirits, that make you feel good, that you like being around, that as I mean, are your wingmen, and try and detach yourself from anyone who's toxic, who brings you down, who makes you feel bad. And if you happen to be one of those people who is toxic, and I really believe that we know our inner truth, work on yourself. We can always improve ourselves in the way that we are around other people. As I mentioned before, exercise your mood. We can just sweat out the bad stuff. You are what you eat. If you eat a lot of crap, you're going to feel like crap. If you have a relaxed body, you're far more likely to have a relaxed mind. So many of us, we're so out of touch with our bodies. We don't know how to relax. We don't know how to stretch. We don't know how to breathe. Such a simple thing. A relaxed breath equals a relaxed and open mind. And one of the things that I'm very, very passionate about, and I think it's really the cornerstone of my well-being and how I manage my life, because there is no cure for depression, is meditation. Meditation is one of the greatest ways that we can keep our beasties at bay. To me, it is like cleaning the window, it is turning down the volume, it is taking that pot of boiling water off the boil. It's just a simple thing, and it is a practice. Quite often people have said to me, I tried meditation once, I couldn't do it. To me, it's a little bit like saying, I went for a run once and I came back and I wasn't fit. It's the same thing. I think the other really important thing is trying to find something that is bigger than yourself. It could be your God, it could be your faith, it could be your community, it could be what you're doing. I think a lot of people in this room are here for a reason because they care. So it's less about you, it could be your family or the street you live in, whatever it is. And again, knowledge is power, validation is a great healer. So read, research, see other people's blogs, other people's information. Creating a mantra that you know to be true, not necessarily these ones. And I like to say, write on a post note 3 to 5 things that you know to be true about yourself. Brush your teeth with it in the morning, brush your teeth with it at the end of the day. Start your day thinking well of yourself, end your day thinking well of yourself. And I don't remember if you remember those little ads with Mrs. Marsh and the dipping the chalk into the... She goes, it does get in. It's the same with, positive thoughts. If we just sort of constantly reinforce them, and it's not twee, it's not stupid, it's just sort of reminding ourselves. One of the things that really brings me undone is when I have too much to do. And one of the greatest things my wife gave me was a lined pad, and I keep it on my right. Whenever I'm working, the one thing that I'll always have to my right is my pad, and I write everything down. As I do them, I cross it off, and that just keeps me in control. That's just a really simple thing. And when I get through things, when I've done them and I've achieved them, I'll give myself a little mental pat on the back. I think we're all so incredibly busy that we very rarely stop to smell the roses, if you like, and just look at what we've done, where we've come and how we've got there. It's really important. Finally, I think this is one of the most important things as a consumer. If we've gone through adversity, if we've really faced difficulty and we've come through the other side, one of the greatest things that we can do is to recycle that experience by helping others. I truly believe this, and I really believe this from my own experience. Finally, if we take the right steps, do the right things, talk to the right people, find those important people, learn how to be vulnerable, learn how to be authentic, learn how to talk from the heart and be ourselves, and always hold on to what I call the most important word in the English language, which is hope. Whatever it is that we're facing, whatever it is that we're going through, it will pass, it will pass, it will pass. Thank you very much.